Conversations That Matter is a partner program for the Centre for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
Dr. Rhonda, welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here.
We're living in very interesting times as far as our ability to age. Not only the time in human history, but also where we live on the west coast of British Columbia, or of Canada actually. How well are we doing at staying alive longer, and staying alive well?
Oh, we're doing really well. Because if you compare, Stu, where we are now for how much older we are and how much longer we're living, compared to 100 years ago, the average lifespan of a woman was age 60. The average lifespan
100 years ago.
100 years ago, 1920, about that time period. So 60? Gee, 58 for a man at that time. Now we're moving forward. At least, if you're 65 years old right now, you have a chance of living 20 more years. From age 65 to 85. And on the West Coast, we certainly have the highest or longest longevity that we have compared to the rest of Canada.
So let's say I live the next 5 years. I'm 65 now and I live another 5 years. Do my odds of living even longer go up because I've made it through the next 5 years and there are exciting advances coming along?
Well, it depends how you're going to live those years.
Oh, yes.
So, of course, it's your part that you have to put into this. So we know a small proportion of longevity is due to your genes. You know, you got to inherit good ones. But really, that's a small percentage, down around 10 to 15%. And then another 15 to 20, 25% depends upon where you live, so you get health care and you're properly taken care of if something does happen to you. But you know, the vast majority of longevity can be attributed to your own personal lifestyle habits. What you do to be proactive and how you can live a better life to minimize the chance of getting all these chronic diseases.
But that means that I have to take responsibility for that.
Correct. And so I can tell you a few things about what you need to do to take responsibility, and we can start. It's never too young to start. Let's put it that way.
But I know that you're going to tell me control what I put in my mouth.
Well, that part. But
Yeah.
you know, there's stuff to be proactive. So, for example, if you're 45 now, think about, or 40 now, think about your family history. Start thinking about that. Ask questions of your family. What do they have? What are you more at risk for? What's gotten grandma and grandpa in the end? Know what that is so you know what your personal risk factors are for diabetes or heart disease, high blood pressure. And then knowing that, go and get yourself checked out. So everyone should know what their blood pressure is. They should know what their cholesterol levels are. They should know what their fasting blood sugars are, because if your mom and dad had type 2 diabetes, we know that you have a 20 to 25% chance of having type 2 diabetes yourself. But the good news is that you can prevent all that by lifestyle.
Well, first of all, let's just go back to getting the test. Why is it so important, especially as we start to clear the half-century mark, that we have that baseline, or that we know where we're at?
It's important because you can do something about it. So, for example, if you have high blood pressure, we know that for every 10 points under 140, which is the top limit of normal, you can actually decrease your risk of stroke by 25 to 27%.
By every 10 points?
Downwards, yes. So if you do have high blood pressure, take the bull by the horns, make some lifestyle changes. Maybe you need some medication, but we know that's going to set you in good stead down the road for preventing strokes or cardiovascular disease.
Well, that comes back to what you put in your mouth.
Yeah, well, can do. And also how you live your life, a little activity and such. If you have high cholesterol, again, some lifestyle measures that you can take so that you can decrease your risk of heart attack and stroke. Because for folks in their 30s to 40s, for every 10 to 20 years you have high cholesterol levels, you can double to quadruple your risk for cardiovascular disease in your 60s.
In your 60s?
Yes.
So it doesn't start just because you're clearing the big 5-0. You really have to be conscious of this all the way through.
Yes.
So in a world where we've seen, especially in North America, some fairly poor dietary choices by a considerable number of people over the last few decades, how do we ensure that the next generation doesn't follow that same pattern And then for those who maybe got a little bit off on the wrong foot, how do we help them get back into a place that will ensure that they have a better quality of life?
You know, and that's a big thing. I mean, you hear about longevity, and folks will say, sometimes I have patients say to me, well, what's the point of living longer, because something's going to get you in the end.
Yeah.
And as you get older, all you're going to do is get sicker and become more disabled. So what's the good of extra years if they're not going to be quality years? Well, the great news about this and the upbeat nature of that is actually a study was recently published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society that found that for the folks who do live long lives, the centenarians, the late 90s, the super old,
The super centenarians.
the super centenarians, they actually found that those folks who lived good long lives compared to the folks who did, they actually have quality lives. So what gets them in the end happens in a compressed time period. So they're
So it's not like they're limping through the last 3 decades of life.
exactly. They actually come down with something possibly in the last few weeks or last few months of life. So they have great quality of life. But again, that depends how you live it. Now, this is where we can take some major lessons from communities around the world called the blue zones.
The blue zones.
The blue zones.
What does that mean,
this is
blue
what's so
zone?
absolutely cool. So this was actually founded by the National Geographic Society, and they did an expedition to go and search out the longest living cultures from around the world. And what was cool about that was they found communities scattered throughout the world had no relationship to each other. Okinawa being one of the most famous ones, where they're longest living folks on the planet. They're centenarians by dozens. The other one was Loma Linda in California.
Loma Linda, California?
Yeah.
What
High
is the air
proportions.
quality that they have there?
Well, but high quality of Seventh-day Adventists. Another community was Sardinia in Italy. Another one was in Icaria in Greece. Now, odd, very different communities, but when they looked at all of these communities, they found a common theme with respect to longevity. And they could intersect all these circles.
I just got to get you to hang on for a second while we take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program.
So what were those common themes? One of them was folks were physically active all their lives. Now, we're not talking about formal exercise. They were just busy. They were putzers. They were in their gardens. They did Tai Chi. They walked everywhere. But they didn't do some formal gym activity whatsoever. The other one that they did was they actually were sensible eaters. So what they did was they ate a plant-based diet. They ate whole grains, more fish-based. And what's really interesting about the Okinawans particularly is they have a saying called hara hachi bu. And that means eat till you're 80% full. So it helps with calorie restrictions, but at the same time, it also helps keep you lean and making sure that you're not overweight, because we know that obesity contributes to many chronic diseases in life.
Yeah.
The other factor that they found was that they had a great outlook in life. So they were de-stressed, or they didn't let that get to them. And the other most overriding feature was they had purpose. So that meant they had a reason to get up every morning. And every one of these folks and communities in their super centenarians, their super seniors, they had that one. And then the other one was they connected with their society. So family was important. Their community was important. They hung with like-minded individuals. Faith-based, perhaps, in Loma Linda for that.
Yeah.
Those were all the connecting features that helped all of these communities produce long-living folks.
So I was just reading an interesting article about the brain immune system connection, and at Virginia University they have just found this physical link, like an actual physical link between the brain and your immune system, and so it leads me to how important is frame of mind in our overall well-being?
Absolutely important. There you go, there's purpose. You have to have purpose in your life. If you don't have purpose, you don't have a reason to get up in the morning, well then, you know, the rest of your body just wonders why you need to do that, and it affects your immune system. Stress, we know, psychological stress decreases your immune system and makes you more vulnerable to getting colds, pneumonias, and then couple that with, as we get a bit older, our immune systems get a little fragile just as it is. So mind-body connection is absolutely key to your immune system and keeping you healthy.
So most of what we've been talking about so far, we've kind of known, and as the years go by, the evidence continues to support that. But as we're living longer, you know, we talked a little bit earlier, there are people who go, well, what difference does it make? My body is deteriorating anyways. What are some of the advances in regenerative medicine that are starting to come along that are you know, giving some hope? Like,
right? Stem cells, for example, as a startup. Now, right now it's still in its infancy stage, but they're looking at these cells that can possibly turn into pluripotential cells, which are cells that could
pluripotent or something. Isn't it?
To help it actually regenerate whatever has gone awry. Still in its infancy, but that's got great promise down the road.
Are we seeing some of that already in treatment of knee ailments and so on, where they're injecting stem cells?
They're looking at that, but I still believe that there needs to be more regulation in that industry, and in fact, a recent study has shown that many centers that are touting stem cell therapies right now may be just a little ahead of their mark as to what they can promise to help folks with. But I think much more on the exciting phase for medicine is the fact that we're moving towards individual treatments, more on a genetic-based treatment for chronic disease or certain diseases. So we're now understanding that many cancers are actually genetically based diseases that are individualized. We know that breast cancer has at least 11 different genetic permutations, and as science marches on, you can help target those genetic changes to help individualized therapy for that particular individual, rather than shotgun treating everybody the same way.
This is our second break. We'll be back in a moment.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program.
So you talk about individualized medicine. That we're really talking about what the promise of mapping the human genome was all about. Does that mean that we're going to, instead of being simply a reactive system, we're going to be able to anticipate and hopefully intervene rather than have to wait for conditions or symptoms to manifest?
And that's the hope down the road. We're still in its infancy for that, but we can see that happening. But I can see that the other part that's helping folks most for their intervention is prevention. I see you're wearing a Fitbit.
Yes, that's right.
There you go.
I'm getting ready to go on a walking holiday, and I want to know how far I walk, but not because I'm...
but how smart is that? Because 10,000 steps of physical activity a day is known to help decrease any chance of coming down with things.
But is 10,000 enough? When we look at our diet, is 10,000 steps really enough?
Well, it's a good start.
Yes.
Because if we compare it to other folks right now, the new mantra is sitting is the new smoking.
Yes, I've heard this a few times.
And you know, our 30 minutes of exercise in the gym doesn't necessarily mitigate or offset all that risk of sitting for 8 to 10 hours a day. So we're talking about activity. So even our standing desks at work, that helps. But we also don't want you to be standing still for that proportion. So a good rule of thumb is don't sit for longer than 20 minutes at a time. Don't stand still for more than 8 minutes at a time. But get up and walk for 2 minutes at least a few times an hour. It's activity that counts. That's where your steps come in, Stu. There's your 10,000 steps in your Fitbit.
But you know, like, I get beaten up by the world, and all I want to do is just go, give me a break. You're telling me that I've got to live like a pious life, be active, don't rest,
No.
like do all those things. I want it to be easy.
Oh yeah, it is easy though. Harahachibu, you can eat till you're 80% full.
But
Anything.
there's no gauge on there that says you're 80% full.
Well, you can check that yourself. That's the important one on that. There's no gauge, and it's hard to learn where you're 80% full.
Yeah.
But you can train yourself to that point by being a little more mindful when you eat. By the time you feel full, you've actually overeaten. It takes 20 minutes from when your stomach actually does reach full potential to your brain registers, oh, I'm full. So what you can do is you can be more mindful as you eat, and when your stomach feels a little bit full already, that's 80% full, rather than your brain saying you're full. So you eat till you stop feeling hungry, not till you're full. And that whole idea of cleaning your plate was not such a good idea.
Well, I was told that we were supposed to because there were people who were starving around the world.
Well, that's right.
And so it was like, finish what's on the plate.
Yeah.
And I always thought, well, look at what that did to me. There's a fellow that I interviewed from the Sauder School of Business, and in his PhD thesis, he was talking about why is it that the French don't get fat? And he said, because they're hedonistic eaters. Huh? Like, how does that make sense? And he said, well, you take a look at what they eat. They shouldn't be as slim as they are. He said, but because they eat for the sensation of the food, once the sensation goes away, they stop eating.
Very similar
Yeah.
to the harahachibu.
And so I
It's
asked
for
him
the pleasure.
Yeah. I said, how does that work? And he goes, we've all had a piece of chocolate cake. I said, yes. And he says, there's that first mouthful where you go, that is good. And the second mouthful is still good. The third one, it's almost neutral. By the fourth or fifth bite, you're not getting any extra pleasure out of it. He says that's when the French stop eating. But we clear the plate.
Right. Or we have this giant size in general.
Yeah.
Such as a glass of red wine. Wonderful to go with a meal, to go with all the folks you're having a meal with. But you don't drink the whole bottle. You have a glass of red wine. And that's one of the ones that increases longevity in some of the cultures that were looked at in the blue zones.
It's so fascinating. I want to learn more about living longer and better, but I got to take our third break. We'll be back in a moment.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program.
So what's happening though, I haven't done these things and now I want to get back on track. But
It's about time.
Yeah, but I'm now suffering from high blood pressure and I've got, gout or something, and I'm going, okay, I don't want this. I want to turn back. How can our medical system get me back on track? Because it's probably reached the point where me just changing my lifestyle isn't going to be enough. It'll be part of it, but what's happening from the perspective of caregivers like you, that you can say, okay, here's what we can do to make this better for you?
I think, well, first of all, you need to see your caregiver. So
Yeah.
that's a big one.
And regularly.
Yes, and that's a really important thing, is how do you have a good relationship with your caregiver? And in these times, it's tough for people to find primary care practitioners. But if you do have the ability to have one that you're associated with, it's important to get to know them and develop a relationship. So continuity of care is absolutely key, so that you get a chance to know what they're like, if you can work together over time, because it's your health. So trying to find someone that you can work with is really important. But the other thing is, in the olden days, we had the medical model of the MD or one person where you go, you see them, you take notes, you go home, and then you just take your drugs and try to live a better life. Now we're looking at a team approach. So for the individuals that have hypertension like you, we want to say...
I don't have hypertension.
You have high blood pressure.
I don't.
Or if you did. Or you're in denial.
No, I actually haven't got the checkup. I'm fine.
Okay, good. So that's the point. If for folks who do have that, or who just want to live a better life and just improve and have great years coming up, we're looking at a team. So get a team together that you have a dietitian on your side, to have them just review your diet. And we all mindlessly eat. Sometimes we're drinking too much coffee. Sometimes we're eating too many carbohydrates and we're not enough protein, or too much protein and not enough carbohydrates. Just balance out your nutrients. Have someone cast eyes upon you. A team there, a team such as kinesiologists, someone who helps you develop a program of physical activity that you can stick to without having to go to the gym, lift weights, and help them find a program that will help keep you active. Maybe a person that you can check in with every now and then, such as a coach or a wellness counselor, to say, hey, where's your mind frame going? Somewhere you can do some meditation with. So you need a team or an approach that will help guide you forward.
So where do CAMs, or complementary and alternative medicines, come into this team approach, and what is the willingness of MDs, medical practitioners, to accept that as part of an individual's own daily regime, or healthcare regime?
Sure, and we do know that most people do take some kind of complementary or alternative medicine. Some folks take glucosamine sulfate for their joints and such. A lot of stuff has some background to it. Some stuff does not have science behind it. But the most important about this is that I would hope that the medical practitioners are now much more open to actually listening to individuals who are taking these things, because we know that at least a third of our patients are taking something. And we should be able to start the dialogue and ask our patients, hey, what else are you taking besides whatever we might have prescribed you? And I would encourage patients too to feel comfortable to say, I am taking this stuff, what do you think? And hoping that your practitioner can give you a good comment about it that will be rational, give you the evidence, have a discussion with you, and work with you in seeing if that can be incorporated into your entire healthcare plan. So I believe that physicians nowadays are much more open to that.
In other words, don't be afraid to have frank conversations with your healthcare practitioner.
Yeah, and also I think healthcare practitioners should not be afraid to have frank conversations and listen to what their patients are actually saying to them, so that they can come together and create the optimal plan for better health.
So you're living your life this way?
Absolutely, I'm living my life this way, for the most part, I've got to say.
Do you have a target that you would like to live to?
Well, my dad lived to 92. My granny lived to over 100, and she was chugging along until some of these super seniors did, just compressed some ill health into the last few years of her life. That's what I'm looking for. I have aunties and uncles in their 90s, and they all still get together and have a great time family-wise. So that's my target, where I want to live more years, but also have life in the years I do live. Yeah, that's what I'm aiming for.
I want to get to 100.
I think that's a possible goal, Stu. That's the way to go.
And the more I talk to you and others who can help me figure out the path to get there, my odds go up. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you for asking me.